experience with Dr. Kenn has mostly been from being present with him as he's leading large public meetings, or sometimes having tea or coffee after one of those large public meetings, doing a little debriefing or wow. But what I know is that Dr. Kenn is a visionary, and not unlike a lot of other visionaries, he's also very forthright. He's not afraid to say, this is how I see it. What about this? To ask a tough question. He is the spiritual leader of our entire denomination, spiritual living. He must have those things together or he wouldn't be in this spot. And he must also be in a place of receptivity or he wouldn't be in this spot. And so together, we are the Centers for Spiritual Living, and he is our guide. He is that compassionate, wise, daring, visionary, clear, forthright man with lots of experience. He's the co-founder of his own center in Kelowna, British Columbia, with his wonderful wife, Deborah. He's got lots of experience, managing a church and being the spiritual leader. He's a lot of fun. He's not much one for, homage to the myths of how it ought to be. I think I've even heard him say he likes debunking them from time to time. But he is about the center. He is about going here. He definitely inspires me and others to have a deeper experience of our faith. I'm very grateful to know Dr. Kenn. He's also coming to our fall conference in Ukraine on the Black Sea in September, so we're really thrilled that he and Deborah are both going to join us. I want you to open your hearts and minds to this man this day, and I invite you to let yourself sense yourself in a brand new way, to allow him the space through you to know what he knows, and to have it be reflected back to him through your catching of that. That's what I invite us to do today, so that together we are in this experience of giving and receiving the high Holy Spirit. So please let us join together and welcome Dr. Kenn Gordon.
Thank you, Reverend Barbara. Oh, I got God bumps. Ugh. I really do. This is like a dream of mine. Deborah and I, my wife Deborah and I, began a church in Kelowna, British Columbia. And we actually, it was our hometown where we were born and raised in Kelowna. And so what we would do is we would travel, because we took all of our teachings in Southern California with Dr. Tom Costa in Palm Desert. And so what we would do is 2 or 3 times a year, we would travel back and forth to Kelowna, BC, and we'd come up this highway. And it just happened that Reading was the 12-hour spot where we'd stop so we could do it in 2 days. So we got to know Reading quite well and adore Reading and love it. And then when Dr. James and Dr. Andrea were here, we were magnetically pulled here. As I know, many of the great students of religious science came from this center, whether you know it or not. They might not have been in attendance here, but Andrea and James's consciousness went out into the world around us and certainly drew and attracted a lot of people in. I'm thinking of Jeffrey Proctor and Jane Ryder and Mary and Sue and so on and so on and so on and so on. So last time I was here, though, the bookstore was still in the back. It was at the back of the sanctuary. So I think that was quite a while ago from what Mary's telling me. Seems like yesterday. I too honor Reverend Mary and Reverend Sue. I'm astounded how powerful a consciousness there is that exists here that has drawn together this possibility and this potential for your new ministry and for things coming into it and continued growth and expansion and evolution for this center. And the cohesiveness that I sense is part of what we're talking about here. The ability to be able to stick to what needs to be done in order to bring into manifestation what is divine in its own nature. And the appreciation, and I know those of you who were here 10 years ago with the Goldens know this, to be able to walk through the perfection even though it doesn't look like perfection. Do you know what I mean? That sense of sometimes, in the case of losing ministers, I would think it would be the sense of not being in connection somehow, the sense of being separate somehow, a certain level of pissed-offtivity, it's a word, that one can develop around the circumstances of what goes on in one's life. Do you know what I'm talking about? Am I the only one here that has that experience? You and I. And to be able to continue with the principle, to know that there's a divinity that's happening. There's something wonderful that's happening. It's happening everywhere. It's never not there. The topic that I was given was tending the soul of the center. And as Reverend Barbara said, tending the soul of the center doesn't just mean tending the soul of the church. It means tending the soul of one's own center, because that's where it begins from. That's where it originates from. It has to start somewhere, so it has to start within ourselves. And we begin to work on it to come together and get that sense of that unified sense and that unified connection within our own being. And it outpictures in the world around us as we move forward. And so whenever we break from that, what happens is we have a healing, which comes from the word wholeness, to come back together again with it, to reconnect with that truth. And you can always tell, or I can always tell myself when I'm moving in that direction, when I find myself in the situation that I begin to realize that the wholeness must be made form in my life and my experience at some point. And to know that years ago, what would occur for me is that I would fracture myself from that wholeness. And then what would occur for that is that I would stay in that spot for months, years, decades. I would just stay there. And I knew that I was waking up. I knew I was coming back to my own being when I suddenly realized that it wasn't going on that long anymore. Suddenly, instead of being somebody who's stuck for decades in a situation, I became someone who was only stuck for a couple of years. And then I was only stuck in that area for a couple of months. And the goal is always the same thing, and that is to not be stuck at all. But as we lower and narrow that view of that feeling, what happens for us is we begin to see more and more the divinity and the right action showing up in our lives in everything. Everything, everything, everything. And that's the big challenge for me, is that to not step into that judgment around what that everything looks like. Instead, to simply accept it. I was a ski patroller in Canada for years, part of the Canadian Ski Patrol. And I can remember once I was skiing down a hill, and I twisted my knee, and I tore the tendons in the back of my knee. And I can remember when that happened, I was in this agony, and I was jumping around, and I was swearing, and I was cursing, and I was putting forward and projecting out every negative aspect and negative thing I could think about. I was thinking how I was going to have to be on crutches on Sunday morning. I was thinking about how I wasn't going to be able to do something. I was thinking about all that stuff that came in there. And it stuck with me for a while. And I can remember I went home and my leg was all wrapped up. And I was sitting at home, and the next morning I got out of bed. And as I got out of bed, I had a nice night. I swung my legs onto the floor, and my leg immediately started to pulsate and hurt. And my wife came through, Deborah came through, and she said, how are you feeling today? And I said, oh God, my leg, it's just throbbing. It hurts so much. It hurts so much. And then it suddenly occurred to me that that wasn't the answer to the question that she was asking. That I'd been focused on this area in my body and this area in my life, and I was focused on it to such a degree that that's all I could build out of it. So I started to think about it. I started to do in my practice that morning to put it into activity and action. And it occurred to me that when I woke up in the morning, that my head felt really good. My arms felt good. The other leg really worked well. And that what I was really focusing on was I was focusing on this little tiddly bit of my body at the back of my legs. It actually probably was only, a half dozen jillion or whatever nerves that came together, but it wasn't anything big in comparison to the whole. It was really minor. And so at that point, what I decided that I wanted to do with my life was I wanted to start to work my life from the principle of being the type of person who, if I stepped off the curb and twisted my ankle, instead of saying, damn, shucks, heck, whatever you want to call it, instead of swearing and jumping up and down, that I could bring myself to the place in my life where I would say, thank you, God. So that when I stepped off and I felt the pain, instead of saying, something horrible's happened in my life, I would say, thank you, God. And recognize and realize that there's a divinity in that takes me to the next place, that will take me to the next place, that will take me to the next place. Mahatma Gandhi said that one of the great blunders of the world, one of the 7 blunders of the world, is to believe that you can have worship without sacrifice. We live in a world, and sacrifices means to make it sacred. We live in a world where what we do is we desanctify and desacredize so many things in our circumstances in our lives. We think that it's being done to us instead of realizing it's being done through us. And we forget that our goal, our journey, our purpose, our vision is to awaken. Our vision is to go from where we're at to the next place. And get up in the morning and go, here's where I'm at, and at the end of the day, arrive that much more evolved, that much more enlightened, that much more awake, that much more present, that much more filled with the understanding of who I am. Reverend Barbara was up here and talking about how maybe perhaps I'm not as spiritual as some people would like their spiritual leader to be. But I'll share with you this because I know that there is nothing to become spiritual about. That what there is a demand upon the universe to become authentic, to become who I was born to be. And everything else and all other things are secondary to it. There is that's before me and that's before you, to become that sacred vessel that you were born to be. And that we don't have to pretend that we're something else. As a matter of fact, that's how we got into the mess in the first place. And I'll tell you why. We know this. We know that everything in our plane, everything outside there, just by basic, simple biology, was created for a purpose. That there's a circle of life and that there's a natural rhythm to life, and everything was created to fit into that. Am I right or am I wrong? So we know that even gnats and mosquitoes are there that feed the birds, that feed the cats, that whatever, you know? And it's that whole system and that whole symbol. And so at all times when we're in that mind that understands the rhythm of life, we understand that there's perfection in all of that. Doesn't mean we like it all the time, but we understand that there's a perfection in the way nature comes together. And it's one of the big drawbacks of being human in this era. And coming out of that era of that development of that concept that was the traditional Christian concept that we were given dominion over the planet. To realize that the downside of that, the pendulum swing coming back the other way, is we believe everything is divine and in perfect harmony with nature with the exception of ourselves. We really, really do. We have that concept of original sin and that concept of divine dominion that goes there, and we try to put it out into the world in form of control, but we don't believe that we are the worthy people, that we fit in there equally as everything else in the world does. And so what we do is we find ourselves attempting to be something else so we can fit into a world that we were meant to be in the perfection of who we were. To fit into the mosaic of life, you need to be 100% authentic. You can't be 50% authentic. Because if you're 50% authentic, you won't fit. You can't be 75% authentic. You won't fit. The world demands that we be 100% authentic in who we are, and when we are all that, all of us, then what will happen is we will live in a world that works for everyone. Because that's the way it was created, with that circular motion in mind always fitting in there. That's what Holmes meant when he said we are bound because we are first free. What it means is that we have the freedom to not be ourselves. So can you imagine if you were really authentic, or perhaps it'd be easier to do it this way. Can you imagine if the person sitting next to you was really authentic? What a gift they would bring to the world and they would give to the world. Of course you can. It's easy for us to fit in that. And so what we do is we enter into it in different modalities of attempts to try to find out how to find out who we are so that we can be authentic. And what a strange place and what a strange way to do that, to really find ourselves in a situation where our biggest struggle is the purpose of our life is to locate who we are so that we can present who we are in truth out in the world. Right? And people will say, oh, I've just got to be me. Well, usually that's precursor to I've just got to be me means you're not going to be you're going to be somebody else is what's going to happen. You just got to be who you think you're supposed to be in order to be able to fit in. So our spiritual quest is to find ourselves and to be able to live out of it all the time and know that that's who we are and know that we're part of that cosmic circle that goes on around us. And therefore know when we step off the curb and we feel pain, that the pain is a symbol of growth and evolution to bring us forward to that which is calling us, that which is pulling and drawing us to it. And the exercises to get there, the ability to be able to tend that, the first and foremost thing is to realize that everything that we know about ourselves up until now is probably not true. And everything that other people we think they know about us is absolutely not true. Absolutely. To find ourselves in a situation where what we can do is we can establish within our lives our own recognition of who we are. The purpose of Centers for Spiritual Living is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence. The vision of the centers is to create a world that works for everyone. And it sounds big and it's supposed to be big. And the mission for that is by supplying tools for personal and global transformation of the individual. And so, that vision has to set before us like our own authenticity has to set before us. And the vision of this center, which you have been holding so strongly, needs to set forward as well. That's how you tend the core. You tend the core by knowing what the purpose is in the first place, by recognizing and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. So when I become spiritual leader, I come out and I know that as I stand there and I say, oh, I should do something spiritual here. I should be quiet and meditative. I shouldn't allow my humor to come forward. I should be serious. I should quote Rumi and Hafiz and, and have meditative music playing behind me and maybe wear some robes and sit. When I do that, I know what's happening is that I am breaking the truth of what spirituality is. And that doesn't mean that isn't the truth for someone else. It's just not the truth for me. And so I have to be myself when I go there and I have to present it because my internal knowledge and knowing is that my purpose is to awaken myself. My vision is to create a world that is in harmony with me, within my own being. Not saying, you're not good enough if you don't wear robes. You're not good enough if you're not meditative. You're not good enough if you're real. Am I making sense? Yes, you are. And therefore, what I search in my life is for tools that provide that for me. The center's purpose, this center, the physical center, the chalice that holds the real contents, which is you, its only purpose is to be a container, to be able to hold the reality that we seek in the same way. It's a container to hold the light to allow people to awaken. So if you come to the center and somebody says, you dirty, rotten sinner, or says you should do this, or you should look like that, in a manner, in a way, as Dr. James taught me, which was not of the Sacred Heart, which is not of that cleanliness of knowing the truth, if you come and do that, then what you know is you know that the vision isn't being maintained, the purpose isn't being maintained. You're here to become who you are. And this place is here to become what it was meant to be, which is a chalice to hold the awakened humanity. And the purpose is to create a world that works for the center in that case, for the individual, and for the world itself. It's just the micro, macro, and growth and expansion all the way through it. And when we put our vision in and when we put our purpose ahead of us and we understand what that is, when we lay it out in front of us like a light and put it out there and we say, okay, I am headed for that light, then the minutia that shows up in life that's around us becomes secondary. It no longer matters what happens and what occurs. It matters to us as individuals, it matters to us from an experiential point of view, and it matters to us from an expression point of view often, but it is not what the vision and the purpose is. It is having a sore leg and turning to the leg and saying, this is my entire life. This is where it comes from. And so, what I know for me is that I need to place that purpose and that vision so far ahead of me. And I need to set it out there in the world in such a way that no thing can prevent me from remembering to go to it. And of course, I forget all the time, which is why I do spiritual practice. And why my spiritual practice is guided totally to, totally to the awakening and the remembering of what the vision is. So that when I'm going into an experience and the experience all of a sudden doesn't work the way I want it to, and instead of headed towards the vision, I go, oh, look, and go over here, and where I used to spend a decade over here dealing with this, now what I do is I do my daily spiritual practice and I remind myself, what is the vision? What is the purpose? And when I see that, I can say the sore leg, the conflict I had with a fellow person, the dent I got in my car, the bill I received. That is not the purpose and it is not the vision. And so then I can get back and head steadfast back towards where I'm headed to. And I do that until the next time it happens, 5 minutes later. But then I do the spiritual practice and come back to it. Am I making sense? This is what I witness you have done. I travel around the world visiting centers and churches. And I travel there, and what I find that a lot of times there's infighting. A lot of times there's dissatisfaction. And the problem's never the problem. You realize that. Is that it doesn't matter. If somebody comes up to me after this talk and tells me what a horrible talk it was and how I'm going to go to hell, which has happened far too often, it's up to me to decide if that's going to be a conflictual minutia that drags me over here. It's up to me to put that into my responsibility and remember that my vision is to awaken. My purpose is to awaken. My vision is to create a world that works for me, that is in harmony with my own being and my own self. And so if I do that and I keep doing it, then what you say to me or someone else says to me or what happens to me in life doesn't matter. Because I believe in the infinite, eternal unfoldment of the consciousness to consciousness ever expanding. So I just simply know that my life right now is dedicated to the purpose and the vision. And it must be made form. I don't know how it's going to be made form. I don't have a clue. I didn't know how we were going to integrate the two organizations. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know how to build a center. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know what to do when I became the spiritual leader, and I still don't. I don't have a clue. All I know, though, is that the vision and the purpose lays before me, and I keep moving in that direction, and I do everything that's put in front of me. Everything. I carry it and I pass through it. Now, you know what that is called? That is called tending the soul. That's what that is. Because the soul isn't something outside of myself. It is that which calls me. It is that reason, the raison d'etre for my being. It lays there before me. And it's ever, ever present and foremost in my thoughts and my mind. I don't allow it to fall away. Reverend Barbara said that I'm known for straight talk. I'm not known for straight talk. I'm known for headed towards the vision. And if it doesn't go towards the vision, I'm willing to get rid of it. Really, if it doesn't support a world that works for everyone, then I will walk right by it. I will step over it. I will not allow it to deter me. We're on a pathway here. There's a great stuff that's happening to us. We are creating something here that's never been created before. I just came from the Pentecostals conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. There's a Las Vegas, Nevada for the Pentecost. But it was really interesting. And you know what I was doing there was I was saying, I don't care what you believe. I don't care that you think I'm a sinner. I don't care that you think I'm a pagan. What I care about is that we meet the vision, that we put into action the purpose. And you can say or do whatever you want, but I need to enlist your help to help me because we can't do it alone. It's time we come together. And you know, I say that to another religious denomination, despite all the conflictual things that happen between us. But I say it because the conflictual things are the sidetrack. It's not the vision. And so I have no problem whatsoever laying down the difference and hearing with a different ear and listening carefully. I have no problem with it whatsoever. Can I do it with the person in my church who is confrontational with me? Can I do it with my children? Can I do it with my wife? You know, am I mature enough, awake enough, clean enough, clear enough to be able to live my life with that knowledge? To know that my feelings of something going on that is amiss have more to do with my fears, my sense of lack, my sense of disconnection, than it does with anything that's happening on the outside in my life. That is awakened, and that is spiritual. People don't offend me. Well, actually, that's not true. People offend the heck out of me, but they don't offend me for very long. And the reason they don't is because I do my spiritual practice. I lay it before me and I lay it out there. I will tell you that you have a purpose in life. The one I just laid out there is my purpose, and it's the purpose of this organization. But you have a purpose. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Any more or any less than a gnat or a mosquito or an oak tree. We are magnificent beyond our understanding. And we all fit together in perfect harmony, not just with humanity, but with life itself. And we need to find our spot in the world and how we fit. And we belong to organizations that say, okay, we're going to work on how we fit in our community. Or in the larger one, we're going to work on how we fit into the world, to bring the vision and the purpose to light. And our participation is to recognize and realize that that is the macro to what we must do in our own being in order to make it happen. And that in reality, we're the macro to that micro. It is a magnificent thing when somebody finds out they have a purpose in who they are. Every great thing ever created on this plane, everything that we've ever celebrated, has been done through the realization and recognition of somebody's own authenticity and somebody's own actualization. To be able to have an idea and put the idea forward and to diligently work towards it and not allow anything on the outside to prevent or stop it is the practice of what we do. To be able to lay out there and say, I am perfect, whole, and complete, and I fit in this world in perfection, and I will not only forgive myself, but I will maintain that presence on my every conscious moment as I move forward. That is what spirituality is. It is not about robes. It is not about incense, although they work. It is instead it's about that awakening within our own being and our own self as to our true nature and who we are. For us to be able to tend the center, for us to be able to tend the church, for us to be able to tend the world, what it requires is that we tend ourselves. And what it requires is that we have the discipline and the sacrifice to be able to recognize and know that that discomfort that you run across is nothing more and nothing less than the divine itself awakening you to your next step and your next stage. This is the purpose. Why else would we be here? What I ask you to do, what I travel around the world doing, is saying, please do that. And will you support us in doing it? You know, this world, in its perfection, is going through the pain of having stepped off a curb. And it's not saying, thank you, God. What it's saying is, we're going to destroy that. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to maintain this. We're going to make this happen. And every time that happens, what that is the minutiae standing over here instead of going to the vision and the awakening over there. And so what it requires is us as humanity to create a collective consciousness. And that collective consciousness doesn't have to be 3.5 billion plus 1. It doesn't have to be 50%. The collective consciousness only needs to be more of the awakened than less than the sleep. And these asleep are waking up and beginning to shift over. You know, the mass sits in the middle, so you have 500,000 filled with fear and guiding us this way, creating different ways and new ways to maintain old standards that don't work, utilizing violence and withholding as tools to prevent us from being able to move into a world that works for everyone. And then you have an awakening on the other side, which is less right now, but it's beginning to grow. And when the 500 million over here, when this turns into 500 million plus 1 over here, what will happen is the momentum of the consciousness will change. Instead of going this way, it will turn and start going this way. It will be the major shift. And that consciousness that I speak of, and it has no political boundaries, that consciousness that I speak of is the consciousness that is maintained by us. It's our responsibility. And the reason it's our responsibility is because those who are given much, much is expected. And because we have a consciousness that is aware of it, we must maintain it and take care of it. So I come here to Redding, California, to this beautiful center that has such a history and is such a milepost center. And I see you all in operation, and I know with an absolute certainty that you're doing the right thing. I see it because I see the numbers. I don't hear the squawking. You are walking your talk. So I'm here to say thank you, to say bless you, and to ask you to continue the work. Reverend Barbara said that I'm here today to support you. I'm here every day to support you. And I want you to know that I love and honor you. So thank you.